So what are y'all's experience with going to summer camp? Personally, I've never done anything of the sort, not really an outdoors person myself, but I've heard some people talk about their experiences, both positive and negative. And for two people from Rooster Teeth in particular, they decided to make their experiences at summer camp into a show called Camp Camp was an indie animated series created by one Jordan Chirtz, known mostly for animating Rooster Teeth adventures, and Mio Luna, known mostly as the Duracell Bunny for Rooster Teeth. It is centered around Camp Campbell, a summer camp ran by part-time legendary adventurer and full-time tax evader Cameron Campbell, as a money laundering scheme against the government. Here we meet two counselors trying to run the camp, David and Gwen. David is super energetic, kind, and empathetic, while Gwen is disinterested, jaded, and sullen. The camp itself is special in the fact that it's open to everyone. From extreme sports to aeronautics, the camp has activities for kids of various ages with various niches, though the quality and depth of each is dubious. And in a show with a magician, a kid with a near insatiable thirst for adventure, and the great-grandson of Neil Armstrong, one of the most unique characters is actually a 10-year-old boy named Max.
There's a place I know that's tucked away, a place where you and I can stay, where we can go to laugh and play, and have adventures every day. I know it sounds hard to believe, but guys and gals, it's true. Camp Campbell is the place for me and you.
But who is Max as a character? In the series, he's portrayed as a cynical kid that loves causing chaos while also putting others down. And while he isn't the only one who does this, what differs him from others like Nerf, the generic bully character, is that Max dabbles in psychological manipulation, oftentimes using it to figure out when things are going wrong or to be the first person to point out obvious flaws when others don't. He mainly messes with David, due to his ignorance and idealistic worldview that conflicts with his nihilistic personality. To understand Max's situation more, we must dive into how he got to Camp Campbell. The problem is that it's never really explored at all in the series. There isn't a prelude episode that explains how or when Max got here, since the show first opens with the introduction of new characters, with Max and David standing outside waiting for them. So instead, let's ask a more direct question. Was Max neglected as a child? To understand that, we must first define what neglected means, the ways it manifests in kids, and then we'll look at some examples that could support the potential theory that Max was neglected as a kid. So let's start with defining what neglect means. According to the Cambridge definition, neglect is defined as a situation in which you do not give enough care or attention to someone or something, or the state of not receiving enough care or attention. This gives us a baseline moving forwards, but doesn't give us the full picture, so let's look at ways neglect can manifest in kids. Healthline gives us a standard list of symptoms to look for when dealing with someone who could be neglected. From depression to low self-esteem, there are a lot of symptoms to look at. So let's look into some episodes and we'll chalk down what Max does in these episodes and how they tie into the symptoms of neglect. The first instance where we could sense that something isn't right comes from the first episode, when Max says,
"I'm here because camp is where kids are sent when their parents don't want to deal with them."
This hints at something grander as the series goes along, clearly showing that Max isn't here on his own accord, unlike other campers. And as the show goes on, we continue to learn more about Max. Let's take a look at the first real example of Max's twisted worldview and aggression towards David, as shown in Season 1, Episode 12, The Order of the Sparrow.
Hey, I'm your real father.
Here, David overhypes the camp about a prize that he won't disclose, and in response, everyone goes to extreme lengths to try to please him for that prize, only for it to end in failure due to Max's need to undermine David's authority. The prize, it turns out, was a bonfire. It then cuts to the bonfire where everyone is disappointed over it, and when David tries to light it, it rains, symbolizing the failure of his mission to make everyone happy. Here we also see Max monologue to David as he tries to light the bonfire anyway in the rain, about how he shouldn't give a shit and how everyone is just a desensitized, apathetic asshole, and to just
get with the program and stop giving a shit.
And when he thinks he's finally broken David, he smiles and walks away. It's only when David fights back and almost dies does Max realize he was wrong and makes it up to him by gathering everyone to light the bonfire and celebrate the sparrow. But even then, he distances himself from his good deed by making the excuse that he only did it because David would off himself or shoot up the camp if he didn't. This episode highlights Max's aggression and complete lack of apathy or passion for others, particularly David. He wants everyone to be just as sad and emotionally detached as he is, which backfires on him when David refuses to give up, ultimately culminating in David almost dying to prove Max wrong. This should have warped Max's perspective, but as it shows later on, it clearly had barely any impact on him. Take for instance, Season 2, Episode 8, Gwen Gets a Job.
Ah, beans.
In this episode, Gwen is blackmailed by Max into retrieving an item for him that was stolen by the Wood Scouts. This item, as it would turn out, would be a stuffed teddy bear. If we look at the state of the bear, we can see it's pretty destroyed, and considering it's only been buried for roughly a day, we can't say it's Mother Nature's fault, meaning he's probably had this bear for years. And I get that kids like to hold on to stuffed animals for years, I did that myself when I was a kid, but this is Max, a cynical guy who could lose his top dog position and get ridiculed by everyone if it was found out that he had one of these, which he does at the end and is sad about. It's clear the bear symbolizes something to Max, but what? A symbol of childhood being clinged onto by an apathetic child who wants others to feel the same pain he feels? A symbol of innocence that is there and always will be no matter how badly it's hurt? Let's look at his attire. He wears red shoes, gray pants, and a blue hoodie with a yellow shirt underneath. This doesn't seem weird until you remember it's summer, and it would be too hot for most people to be wearing a hoodie, which could indicate that he's most likely insecure about himself or his body. It is a metaphorical shield from others which could feed into him feeling lonely of himself, which may come from a lack of support or beneficial interactions with his parents. And no episode illustrates this more clearly than Season 2, Episode 12, Parents' Day.
Parents are here. Fuck.
Here, everyone's parents show up due to David's stupidity, and thus Cameron Campbell has to put on a show to keep the FBI officers from arresting him. Only one thing is missing: Max's parents. He reiterates that they don't really care for this kind of stuff, insinuating that they aren't coming due to it being the fault of the camp itself. But as the episode goes along, we slowly start to piece things together. From David's adamancy that Max's parents will show up around lunchtime, to everyone showing off what they have learned perfectly, causing Max to get more and more pissed as it gets closer to his turn, ultimately culminating in the final act, where the two counselors don't actually know what Max signed up for, and so Gwen goes to retrieve his file. And when Max still refuses to perform, David finally snaps and berates Max, asking him why he always tries to put everyone down instead of trying to have fun. Then Gwen hands David the file. The final piece is put into place. His parents didn't select an activity. His parents really don't care for him and just sent him here so they didn't have to deal with him. And as the file is slipped out of the way, we see Max vulnerable for the first time in the series. He's about to cry. He then wipes away his tears before telling David to just think of something so they could get this over with. And as Cameron Campbell tells the audience to give it up for the most important performance, Dave worryingly looks over. And then we get the most powerful scene in the show. He sees Max sitting in the corner, about to cry as he puts his head down in shame. This is the true effect of neglect. All this time, Max has tried to reject his reality and focus his aggression on the happier people in his life, or the shitty situation he finds himself in. But now that he's been cornered, there's no coping or projecting his way out of sharing his feelings. At the end of the day, Max is a child, and regardless of how grown up he is internally, his emotions cannot be held up by pure maturity or a firm sigh. He's a vulnerable teenage boy going through one of the worst things any minor can go through. The lack of support, love, or care in his household has caused this uncaring feeling and complete disregard for humanity. It formed who he would eventually become, and without positive influences like his friends or an overly caring counselor, he cannot possibly grow. As a result, he would most likely grow into a bitter, pessimistic adult. And finally, there isn't another time in the series where we see Max cry. This is truly the lowest he goes mentally. Now let's take a break from the hard hitters for a moment to talk about Max's sleep schedule, as it is important to our diagnosis. Take for instance the double example from 2 separate episodes. The first is season 1, episode 8, Into Town.
Don't come back. Come back when you're 18.
I was not prepared for that.
In Into Town, David goes into town. This excites Max because he thinks David has finally snapped and wanted to know what he does for fun due to him believing no one is that happy. Skipping towards the end when they believe David is going to kill Max, Max says this.
I just wanted to show him that his entire philosophical outlook on life is flawed and that the fundamental beliefs and ideologies he holds so dearly are trivial, so he'll start crying himself to sleep like the rest of us. I'm not a monster!
Max talks about how he cries in his sleep, which yes, just can be from night terrors and nightmares, but also stress and anxiety. This doesn't prove that much for now, so we'll just put a pin in it and move on to Season 3, Episode 9, The Candy Kingpin. In this episode, Dolph and Max begin running a candy smuggling business. Typical camp shenanigans ensue, but it's one line that Dolph says that alleviates our previous point with another new discovery, which is,
Did you know you grind your teeth in your sleep?
this is bruxism, and the causes of this are mainly from stress, but also family factors such as trauma or neglect, according to the National Library of Medicine. These 2 examples combined show that Max typically cries in his sleep, and if he isn't, he's grinding his teeth, which can be both correlated to stress or anxiety that is caused by his potential childhood neglect. Continuing on, let's look at Season 3, Episode 12, Camp Corp.
Hey, that's against the rules!
Rules?
Let's burn this fucker down.
Here we start the episode with a rundown Camp Campbell, with only Max there. We then get flashbacks as to what happened. The camp ran out of money and so it was sold to Camp Corp. But as a result, the camp was shutting down and everyone was forced to split up to go to new camps. This pisses everyone off because they don't want to separate, and the scene puts the biggest emphasis on how this affects Max's friend group, with Nikki and Neil being sad because they won't see each other again. But oddly enough, Max doesn't seem to care at all, and is instead looking through David's phone, and it isn't until Nikki confronts Max that he even talks about it. He questions why they care so much, stating, "Grow up, you think summer was going to last forever? We were temporary friends at best." This causes his friends to get annoyed at him and question what he means, and when Max tries to elaborate, they brush him off and leave. Max actually feels genuinely bad for doing that, and due to his screw-up, he gets Campbell, David, and Gwen together to get the camp back. To me, this looks like a classic case of emotional distancing that is caused by neglect. While Max doesn't have a hard time making friends, he has a hard time believing he'd ever keep them, and so distances himself emotionally when the time comes so he doesn't feel hurt, which in return hurts his friends because it's portrayed as him not caring about them. This would be caused by not being able to keep his parents' attention, and since they literally sent him here so they wouldn't have to deal with him, I'm assuming this is what happened. Max, in the end, gets the camp back, clearly showing that he did this for selfless reasons, because he goes out of his way so he could get his friends back and to apologize to them for being a jerk.
I didn't go to all this trouble for Camp Campbell. I did it for you guys. Because you're my friends. And I just didn't want to admit it. Because once the time came for us to actually say goodbye, I'd have something to lose. But you know, trying to go through life all on your own seems pretty fucking stupid now.
But alas, we have one more example to look at. The special with friends like these.
Did you know the only thing keeping this country together are good people with these? No! This is exactly why my other friends say we need to ban these weapons!
Let's skip the details since it's very long and the first half isn't relevant. What's going on is that it's the final week of camp, and the campers are allowed to make their own special project for So Long Summer. Everyone is involved in the planning, all except for Max, who is lurking in the background and is distant from everyone. And you would think, just like previously, he wants to emotionally distance himself from everyone so he won't be nearly as hurt when summer ends and everyone leaves camp. But instead, David finds him and tries to talk to him, only to get snappy responses from Max about how he doesn't want it to end and how
life's nothing but one disappointment after another. I just can't believe I let myself forget it.
Max has a disdain for human sincerity due to him being cynical, which is most likely due to his upbringing he experienced and oftentimes only looks at the bad and never the good. And because of that, he storms off, back to his tent to be alone, to stew in his sadness. Eventually, David takes him to the top of a hill to watch the sunset, and Max says this in response to David's question about why he likes sunsets.
You know, I think I probably do, so let me save us both time. I like how the sunset is a beautiful goodbye to a wonderful day. And even though the nights might be cold and long, we can always count on the sunrise. How's that? Is that where this is going?
Well, that's pretty close.
Well, here's where that falls apart. Where you can count on good times coming around, I can just as easily expect the bad. So, this is all a huge waste of time because we're both right.
This confirms our previous theory that Max really only sees the bad in everything, and is always pessimistic. I'll let the rest of the clip play out for y'all so we can truly see where Max realizes he was wrong.
I actually think we might both be wrong. Nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow, or the day after that. It could be good, bad, total surprise. One day, you're at a summer camp you hate. The next, you don't want to leave.
There are many other smaller examples throughout the series that aren't as impactful, repeat what has already been said or done, or aren't related to neglect, such as Season 4, Episode 17, The Butterfinger Effect, where Max talks to everybody about how he likes them as friends and how he'd support everyone if they changed activities, or Season 4, Episode 18, Time Capsules, when Max reads Gwen's diary out loud to everyone unapologetically, and then tries to make it up to her not because it was wrong, but because he wants to feel happy again because he was changing and he hated it. And if there are still any doubts about Max's neglect, I have one more clip to show you, not from the show, but from a behind the scenes for Camp. Here, Yasa Bedolia, the director and leader, says this:
absentee parents, divorce, anxiety.
Now we can easily point the last two examples to multiple characters from the show, but who in the series has never had their parents shown? Max. They made Max to be a neglected child with absentee parents. Even Michael Jones, the voice actor of Max, agrees to that point.
Max has the only parents that just are not there, checked out, don't care, just drop their kid off, and you deal with them.
So wrapping back to the original question, was Max neglected as a child? From what we have examined, yes. His parents don't care for him and forced him to Camp Campbell to get away from him, not even bothering to sign him up for any activity, giving his last name or any contact information, clearly showing that they rushed the process to get him in. Max is only 10, mind you, and this would scar a child. If the show really did have a good ending to it, we could see everyone leaving but Max. As some fan animations have put it, most likely Max's parents would never come to pick him up. Rather, they would want Max to stay at camp forever, losing custody over him to David in the end. His parents neglected him for potentially all of his life, making him feel like nothing, and as a result he has developed a very pessimistic, apathetic worldview, where everyone to him is a desensitized, apathetic asshole, where friends are temporary, where there is only bad in everything, and where he refuses to believe that there are genuinely happy people out there that want to support him. He most likely only hates David because he's like the father he never had, but that is just speculation and not fact. Max is a sad case study that potentially millions of kids can relate to, and to see it put on full display in a series filled with comedy strikes a chord in many people's hearts. I wish this show had ended on a happier note, and I wish we got to see Max's chapter end on a high note, but instead all we got was, well, I'll save my thoughts for a rant video for another day. I guess I'll end this video on one final note. If you feel like Max, like you've been neglected, you are not alone. And there are plenty of people online and in the real world that can help you get through it. That's kind of generic to say, but it's true. Your suffering does not define you. You will get through this, and change can happen. Just like with Max towards the end of the series, whether he wanted it to or not. I'm Hazel here, and thank you for watching.